Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. We have a spicy one here with Death Shadow on camera. Now, I played a bunch of Death Shadow back when it was Bug and Deathrite Shaman was in the format, and the deck struggled pretty hard against Chalice of the Void, as you had Delver of Secrets, Death Shadow, and the Deathrite Shaman, all of them getting shut off by Chalice. Of course, things have changed quite a bit with Deathrite leaving the format. We lost both Deathrite and Gataxian Probe out of that deck, and somehow what emerged from the ashes was an even better build. It went to blue-black and just really ended up being one of the best choices for Delver strategies for quite a while. I think Veil of Summer was probably the card that kind of soft banned him to Torok, which is a card that was featured in a multiples in the main deck back then, and that kind of brings us up to where we are now. Now, Death Shadow is a Delver deck, aggressive, counter spells, manages to have discard. It's going to be putting a lot of pressure on Lucas's life total. Death Shadow, the main reason to be running these shock lands. And the shock land's one of the reasons to run the deck as well. You actually don't need an entire mana base full of revised dual lands. You can get away with quite a bit of shock lands. And indeed, you often prefer them over the originals. You generally want at least one Underground Sea, though. Possibly only one, but I would say 1 to 2. That's going to allow you to use days without continually punishing yourself. Once you've gotten Death Shadows online, you may not actually want to continue losing life in certain matchups. See a Terminus clearing that Delver of Secrets, and Rob not using a Force of Will on it. So many ways to go after Bant here. With the battlefield on the stack, go after their mana base is a little bit tougher, given how rock solid it is. Other control decks certainly do not enjoy the stability that Bant has with its mana base. Just a whole bunch of basic lands, I believe 6 in total, typically, and now we've got a Death Shadow. Fetch lands, shocks, Force of Will, Thoughtseize, cycling Street Wraith. So many ways to get your life total under 13. Being a 12-12 for 1. Actually, this deck can perhaps make it a 13-13 for 1 mana. Our Dress Down can remove all abilities. But a Force of Will going after this Ice Fang Kodal, which will have Death Touch, a Force back. Oh, and gonna go with the double daze route. That Ice Fang out of there without allowing Lucas to draw a card. He's got a Fatal Push, which could have removed it, but much preferring to deny the card draw. See if that works out. Brainstorm looking for an answer for this very efficient threat. So Dress Down can actually just make Death Shadow a straight up 13-13. Great value. And it looks like a prismatic ending. Gonna exile this Death Shadow. That is way, way in exile. Time people put that tapped underneath their graveyard. Hopefully it makes its way back into the deck. 2 and possibly 3. 4 counters here for Murktide Regent. And a Delver of Secrets. Potentially playing into Terminus. The Murktide Regent is going to get Lucas out of there in just 2 swings if everything goes smoothly. Looks like Terminus is coming into play here. Getting that 2 for 1. That is punished. Oh, and no follow-up, yeah. Yeah, Murktide Regent may be a big enough threat on its own, or even perhaps the Delver if you're confident you can get them to commit a Terminus. And Rob, I think, recognizing the overcommitment that led to that Terminus just being so backbreaking, That's going to do it. Euro would have been ice skating uphill for certain. If he had a Murktide region in play, though, as a 7/7, certainly changes the dynamic quite a bit. Euro can't attack without dying. Stare at each other for a bit. But ultimately, Death Shadow going to be the aggressor. You're not going to want to be sitting back. You're going to want to go for the throat. Really just causing a absolute bloodbath, both to your own life total and your opponent. A good Death Shadow game. Done a ton of damage to yourself and your opponent. So for removal, you also have access to Dismember and Snuff Out. I'd argue Snuff Out probably the best of the possible removal spells here. Bant not having access to Baleful Strix. Snuff Out destroying a target non-black creature for 0 mana most of the time. If you have a swamp, you just pay the 4 life, which is something you're very keen to do anyways. Dismember, you're able to pay 4 life, however, it gives -5/-5, which is not nearly as good at actually taking out a Euro. Just making it a 1/1 is not super helpful. And of course, Fatal Push. It's something that can take out a Euro with a little bit of effort. The converted mana cost 4 or less does take care of most of the threats, and you're reasonably happy using that to get rid of a Baleful Strix or Icefang Codal style speed bump. But the fact that they draw the card just highlights the strength of those cards. And the same with Euro. I mean, when you're trading card for card and your opponent's drawing more cards than you, at the end of the day, you all end up with nothing, and they'll have a few cards of which something will be able to win. Especially in the case of Euro, just incredibly grindy card. Brainstorm with a fetch land assembled here for Rob. Best combo in the game. Flooded Strand for Lucas. Those Onslaught Flooded Strand, goodness, really gone up. All of the Onslaught fetches to the moon. Pair of Watery Graves for Rob. And Bant can occasionally run. Oh, it's actually going to resolve. I was going to say Bant can occasionally run back to basics in the sideboard, which could be interesting in this matchup. Hymn to Torok actually resolving against Bant. A lot of ways that could have not resolved, including Veil of Summer. And a Death Shadow already showing up just as a 1/1. One of the problems with Death Shadow against decks with Swords to Plowshares is you can never really deploy 2 of them. As if your opponent's Swords to Plowshares just one of your Death Shadows, you end up losing the other one. State-based effect as you go back to 13 life. Euro has arrived, setting up some dangerous future turns. Rob really needs a clock here. Thoughtseize sees just a pair of Swords to Plowshares. This feels so close to being in good shape. Just going to jam a Death Shadow right into this Swords. And Lucas going to be happy to Swords it. And then cast a Euro on his turn. Does he have enough to escape? It actually doesn't look it. But the Swords adds another card to the graveyard. Now, Lucas has the option of swordsing in the end step. Probably won't because he has a land drop. Not really going to help too much. Got Euro. That gets Force of Willed out of the bin. And Lucas is really playing around days here. And decides to just jam anyways. There's one card left in hand. Decides to get rid of that Death Shadow before it becomes too much of a problem. Rob ponders card selection here. And a Murktide region is absolutely massive. 8 power, 5 +1/+1 counters. This guy's turning sideways. Huge chunks of life evaporating in front of Lucas's eyes. This 8/8 for just 2 mana. Rare that we've seen a card at this power level. Lucas with the force of will. No help against already resolved threats, however. He has just 2 turns to live. Or we're on to the next one. Brainstorm, that's all you can hope for. There's the back to basics, and that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is the gambit of running a card like that. It's great when you're ahead, but if you're already behind and your opponent resolves a threat, not necessarily going to be happy. Like if you have it in your sideboard, you're going to want to bring it in matchups like this where there's almost no basic lands, but this deck's so aggressive that it's very possible you'll end up behind and unable to enjoy any type of protection that back to basics might provide from future threats, as you'll just be dead to the existing threats that have already arrived. It doesn't do anything to stop those previously resolved creatures. And both Death Shadow and Murktide Regent can push through serious damage very quickly, as we've seen. Now Lucas will have the play, which is not so important that he has the play, but that Rob doesn't have the play. That's kind of the thing. There are some decks that are much better on the play. Sometimes you just really can't afford to fall too far behind with your opponent's deck. I mean, Bant is the type of deck that I wouldn't be surprised if some pilots would be of the opinion that they should be on the draw in the mirror, for example. Would not shock me. I haven't heard anybody theory crafting that. Any Bant players, let me know if there's that type of chatter around how to play the mirror. I'd imagine it's not an uncommon occurrence. It's one of the best control decks in the format. But being able to get that extra card could easily be worth the tempo loss. It has been historically in different control mirrors. But you certainly wouldn't value the extra card over the speed boost that Death Shadow would get. And here we go, Lucas down 2 cards, an Ice Fang, one of the cards going to the bottom. You know, that's a card that you really want, but you need the lands to go along with it. The ground C into a Thoughtseize, really hammering this mull. Now Euro with no help at all. Lucas likely to be able to cast Euro on this 3rd turn. Maybe he's drawn a land. Nothing to help him escape as of yet, showing the cards that he bottomed. Casting Euro. Does have a tropical island to put in off of it. He's gained some life. You can get a few more cards in the graveyard, then Euro will be more of a threat. I mean, if he sticks around, he'll be a massive problem. 6/6, drawing a card every time it attacks is certainly menacing. A Death Shadow as a 1/1 right now. Ice Fang could kill it even without Death Touch. Oh, and a pair of Death Shadows. Making the judgment call. Assuming or hoping that Lucas doesn't find that Swords to Plowshares, which would be absolute blowout. Swords so good versus Death Shadow. Wasteland takes out the tropical island. Brainstorm in response, allowing the Wasteland to resolve, though. Another Euro in hand. Just 2 damage coming in. Force of Will, gonna try and deny this Terminus. Oh, and it's a Veil of Summer. Oh, what a graphic turn of events. We've got a Force of Will being denied by Veil. That Terminus resolving, clearing both Death Shadows. Now Murktide Regent Rob bouncing right back with another major threat, 8/8 flyer. That was a devastating swing. Oh, Swords to Plowshares located. Lucas has to feel like he's just running well at this point. The deck giving up exactly what he needs. Pushing Rob outside of Death Shadow range as well. Even if he top decks a Death Shadow, not going to be of use. All of that life gained from Swords. You guys feel about the new card icons or overlays? I'm not sure what we even call it, but I'm pulling up live as we go cards from Scryfall. Give you some reminder text. We've got a Euro along with Carpet of Flowers, which is producing, I mean, it's just like a reusable Black Lotus here. Gonna be able to keep this Euro going. He'll win this race currently. Ponder digs, sees a Force of Will. That will be welcome. Once Euro starts turning sideways and generating some card advantage, Lucas is going to be very happy to say no anything that's overly damaging. Back to Basics, also an interesting card. Both Delvers do flip. Pondering, Spell Pierce, Force, and Hymn to Turok. None of those really deal with the major problem, which is this Euro on board. This is the main problem. Going to gain 3 life, invalidating one of these Delvers, essentially. Thought Scour. Digging. Both turning sideways. In a Wasteland. Takes out one of these lands, but that is not super helpful. Back to Basics. And he does have the Snuff Out, the last card in hand. Snuff Out takes out the Euro, but he just bounces right back. Escaping from the underworld for just 4 mana. Devastating. Not only does he come back, but you're getting a card and the life right there, and then another Wasteland. The losing proposition as far as mana goes. Rob's mana base crippled by this back to basics. Looks, he swings. And yet another Delver, but not going to work. Down to 3. No need to worry about reach. At the very least, you're not going to get lightning bolted by this Bant deck. Very little comfort. 3 Delvers. Swinging for 9 a turn. Just not enough versus Euro. Rob needs another blocker. Completely tapped himself out. And now a Hull Breacher gets the concession as Rob extends the hand and scoops it up in a very back and forth, interesting matchup. Underplayed deck there. Death Shadow. Love to see that in Legacy.